working, so we can't do it.
All right, we're calling the meeting to order. Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission for April 14th. And I will now have a roll call of the voting members. Keith Allgood is absent. Tony Campbell is absent. Tony Gross.
Here.
Mike Hargis is absent. Lauren Hill is absent. Sound like a baseball game. Brian McCain.
Here.
Mike Padno, that's me, I'm here. Chuck Slater.
Here.
Todd Verhoeven.
Here.
Okay. Non-voting staff, Sharon Armstrong.
Here.
John Lawless is not here, but Kelly, you're kind of covering the city side, okay? And Martha Brooks Perry.
Here.
All right. So we do have a quorum. And you have before you the March 10th Planning Commission meeting agenda minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. And now you have the agenda for today's meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Wait,
Aye.
wait.
Oh,
Hi.
too late.
After consultation with the city attorney, I would like to ask to amend for this concept
The
review.
agenda for today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, so before we approve that agenda, what is it we want to amend?
It is under other discussion only, no vote.
Okay.
It is a concept review application by Tommy Crouch, and it's discussion only. It should take about 3 minutes.
Okay? So,
Move to approve as amended. Second.
all right. We good with that motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. So as amended, this agenda is approved. And we'll wait for, we'll stop blowing its horn there. Okay. Now we're at the community input section. I want to ask, is there anybody here who wants to input before we go through the agenda? Okay, sir, is there anybody else? I just want to make sure I know how many so we can have the time and everything. So, okay, so you can go ahead. I'll give you a couple minutes. Will that be enough time?
Oh, yeah, it should just, there's
Okay. Just tell us, sir, who you are. and
oh,
where
I'm
you
Dan
live.
Rooney. I live at the townhomes right across the street.
Okay, and can you step up to the podium, sir?
Sure. So, and I actually printed a thing. So we're having a little drainage issue behind and right behind condos where there's just standing water.
Okay.
And I think there's a drainage ditch.
Okay.
And I haven't investigated because I don't want to run across any snakes
Okay.
or anything like that. So, but is there an application I can fill out to have the city take a look and see if that ditch can be cleaned out and maybe that'll alleviate? Because there's like the water's running into the foundation of the condos and all the metal in my house is starting to rust.
Okay, so is that what you wanted to do, was ask that question today?
Well, yeah, what application do I fill out to start the city review, I
Okay,
guess? Does that
so
make sense?
staff can tell you that. Kelly, do you know that information, or Sharon?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, so they will give you the information that you need, sir?
Okay,
All right.
that was all I had.
Okay, so you can either see Sharon after the meeting?
After the meeting, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody else on community input? Okay. So, old business, or you could come to City Hall if you didn't want to sit through the meeting.
Where's that? Is this City Hall?
It's right, it's a building right there. So you can do that during normal business hours if you didn't want to sit through this meeting.
And then just ask them what the
Yes,
application
it's your preference. Did you want to stay?
Actually, I've got so much work to do. I'd rather not.
Okay. So Sharon, did you want to tell them something? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Briefly, if you would, if you will jot.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you got mine?
I got John.
Okay. You can just jot your email down,
Sure, they might want to stay in here 17.
and he's gonna get you one of my cards. And
Oh,
just call
thank
us.
you.
Well, Oh, it's like,
That's where,
oh, I thought he was talking about.
Okay.
that's where the water's going.
No, it's, hopefully it's like simple, like something about
Or,
that.
or not.
Hang around, or not, yeah.
So
Thank
you're,
you.
you're welcome to stay again, I just wanted to let you know that you could go to City Hall.
Okay, thank you,
All right.
appreciate it.
So, old business, the first item, A, Oak Street final plat for Kingston Springs United Methodist Church, which was deterred from the March meeting.
That's correct. You will have a copy of that in front of you. I believe it's the first one up.
Yep.
We are going to have to, I have one. Mr. McCain will have some information on this later as well, because he's a surveyor of the project. The Kingston Springs United Methodist Church, right down the street here, wants to reconfigure and combine two lots. Over the course of the past 20 years, I've probably worked with them on 5 or 6 different projects, and they have always had issues because of the restriction of the lots and zoning. The purpose of this at this juncture is to put a pavilion structure on so they can have an open area to have outside activities for the church. And where they wanted to put it, straddle the parcel line, that's a whole nother discussion. So I made the suggestion that since they are part of the downtown overlay that we did for that mixed use, this is our first one, that it may be appropriate for them first to do the plat, and 2, to apply for planning commission approval of that mixed use under that new zoning district. So that's where we are. I have checked the plat, everything is in order, it was done correctly. One notation I want to pay particular attention to is this small 1-story house. I'm sorry.
The one that sits up on Oak Street? It's one on Oak Street.
Yes, on Oak Street.
Yeah, okay.
Small house. This house is currently leased to someone who does nonprofit service to the community. It has been there way before the zoning ordinance was enacted, so it is truly grandfathered. And which brings me to a short subject. Your next training session is the distinction between non-conforming and grandfathered. It's going to come up more frequently. So that, even though it is within the setback, is irrelevant to you, because it precedes the adoption of any restrictions. So I recommend approval of the plat. And Mr. McCain may have something to offer to that.
The only issue we have right now is United Methodist, well, any Methodist churches, they have a central church. So they're going through the motions in the church to see who signs the plat and get it approved by the master church and all that stuff. So that's why it's still hanging out there.
And
All we have to do is approve the plat.
you can approve it, and we're going to withhold, you can approve it, but before we can file the plat, it has to have that signature. All those are required by the county and by the state. But we wanted to bring it to you for approval, and then once that signature is acquired, then Lauren can sign it, and it's good to file. But we just didn't want to hold them up any longer.
Okay? All right, Martha
Mr. Chair,
Burke?
if I could, are you going to be declaring a conflict and not voting? If I could have a moment to see if we're going to have enough votes to pass this?
We don't.
We don't.
Yeah, I was looking to see if it's a majority of those present or
not.
majority of the entire commission. So if y'all will bear with me for
Okay.
1 second, let me
Okay.
confirm
All right.
that.
I'm sorry, Martha, it didn't even occur to me. Brian, you're going to have to stop working so hard.
I hear you.
Short on votes.
Yeah, we did do that then.
And
Tony asked if we needed.
Just as an aside, unless we have permission from the applicant to defer, we're in some kind of murky water for the time frame the state gives us to review. That we can't visit a burden on the applicant because we don't have a
So should we
form
force Tony
announced
Campbell
and
to come down
reviewed.
here then?
We only have 60 days unless he agrees to defer. It's one of the funny aberrations in state planning law that you have 60 days from the date of submission to the planning commission. We've already deferred it once.
we defer it again, it's approved by default. You don't want to be in a position of approving things by default. So we're going to have to lean on Mr. McCain's politeness if we don't have a quorum to defer it. Because we don't have sufficient numbers to vote.
That'd be for some other stuff too, they want to.
There's a lot on there that you're.
Everything you have on the table. It's in state statutes. The statute states that you have to have a quorum.
We need him.
Majority of
I just texted him to see if he could come.
If he can't vote.
I'll just call him.
Yeah, he's obviously.
Put your pants on, come on.
We need you, bud.
It would be in the bylaws, but it's in the
Hey, Tony?
bylaws, and it's in the-
Yeah, we kind of need you down here if it's possible. We actually, we don't have a quorum or, thanks, okay, but Tony's on his way.
Okay,
Good.
fantastic.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, it's not like.
No, it was good to be caught now.
Deputy.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that
us approve
we
something.
were gonna have such
else.
a narrow,
If you all want to
Quorum.
recess for 5 minutes to allow him to get here, you certainly
you
can
wanna do
do
that?
so.
Make a 5-minute recess so we can let Tony get down here. He said
Sure.
he's out the door in 2 minutes. He said
Okay,
he
we'll
would
make a
walk
5-minute
over.
recess.
Well, we can do that. I apologize. We can do that, or we can move it lower on the agenda because we do have you're not responsible for the next one.
Okay, you all good with that?
Yeah, let's
Okay,
go on
let's
to
do
that.
that.
Yeah, let's move
Wait a
Ellen.
minute, if you move to,
I would suggest that
wait.
I would suggest that you wait because he potentially will be here to vote on something that you are going to be discussing that he's not here for the
Either way.
discussion. So,
Okay,
All right.
he said he was on his way out. He only lives like around the corner.
Well, you got folks behind you that are elders, you want to do that update.
So do we want to do a recess?
Is it necessary? I mean, I'm happy to one recess.
So is there anything on it?
Yeah, well, just
recess.
recess for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
So, as part of your homework, I want you to program every planning commission member's number into your phone.
Yeah, right. We're gonna start a group text. It's gonna be annoying, it's gonna be great.
Not another.
Those can get out of hand real quick. I've got 3 girls sitting there too.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be in the bylaws, and I don't know, he may have it in the bylaws.
Obviously, this is zoning and.
So, I mean, it lights up and then the super extroverts that
I asked him for a copy of the bylaws, and I also asked him to
New
send
team that I'm just taking
it
over, my new role.
because it states that he's a voting
Half the
member,
characters on that.
which
Yeah.
can't
Eddie Langston.
Oh, Eddie's on there.
I
Blue Saturday,
made that
Eddie for a
suggestion.
week in July.
Eddie's a good guy, but he's a visitor.
Oh, yes, he is.
So it's just
He got 2
something.
more years before he retires, so the wheels fall off. He doesn't care.
I can look at the code.
Yeah, I've got the code right here.
He's
See
nonstop.
if it's there.
I love the guy, but he's nonstop.
I get expense reports.
Yeah, it just
like 10
specifies,
o'clock
it does
on
not give
Saturday. I don't know
city
what
manager the
you're
right to
approving them
vote.
right now, or who's sending them?
Yeah, I know, hey, people,
At least if I was somewhere where
allergies.
interesting,
My name would drive me nuts.
smart guys, you know, there's
They spent Friday and Sunday at Fever and Head.
Oh my goodness. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, much, thank you.
I stuck these in my ears when I got them on the 28th. And they weren't programmed.
Storm damage over there,
And I
Tony?
drove
That's
down.
about national.
Storm damage
It
over there?
sounds I've never heard.
Oh, no. No, we,
So, and they're
yeah, we've
thousands
got
of
the
them.
ability now to raise
I'm
the.
trying to drive.
Don't call my house.
Yeah, the state
Big oak
legislature,
trees every time we have
that
a
tax
lot of wind.
actually through
I ride up,
Sounds
pick up a lot of
outside.
dead wood, you know.
a couple of years. I got wired about it, getting it as a private act.
So it was horrific, so I just turned it out toward home. And I'm still adjusting them, their AI, their artificial intelligence, this thing called Edge Mode, where they adjust
Yeah, to get a private act.
to get
They always get it right. So I can be sitting in a meeting and
The
just
legislature.
blast my ears.
But anyway, they
So
just
you didn't
made
use that
it.
very-
But I don't have to keep apologizing every time I speak. So
We have to use
I
it
have
for
had
don't
hearing
tourism and stuff like that, but,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was.
That's what this guy
It actually,
Yeah.
you know, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's.
Still, that's very working on.
And that was my taxes.
Majors here.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
gonna talk about everything for the next time around. We'll hear that whole discussion.
I tell you what, you know, they talk about Mexico,
I heard that.
taped up
So
6
we're
foot
trying
deep
to
ditch.
Gravel beach, the conversation right here. No,
They're
we're
around
around
the
the
church.
They
Oh,
probably.
yeah. Oh, good, good, yeah, there's a few that weren't on there.
This would be a good time to talk
So
about.
they were up out of the water, I mean, unless you went
Make you feel
down.
lazy.
Which I didn't do.
Ask
So once in a while, I went down.
Ask Mr. Green to come and see.
We had a discussion on that.
We got a,
She's a sweet thing. I like it.
on Highway 70, there's
Just
still.
ask him to come and talk to me while we go to break.
Wood everywhere.
I know, I
Yeah, you got a early voting now, so.
had my barber
Tomorrow morning.
shut down the way there.
I
I had to find another barber block, I got a light bulb. Well, then I went to him, took care of my 6 months,
They are.
and then he decided to go into the ditch
For a wife.
and go into the barber shop out there. There's no barber in that shop. So now I gotta drive over to the ditch and get a haircut.
There he is.
Hey, sir, thank you, thank you.
We had a quorum, but Brian is recused himself several things, so we didn't actually have.
There's one place we tell me we're a valley here. Every tree in that valley is just plumb down.
That's Paul Harris's.
Oh, is it?
Paul Harris's place.
John,
Thank
is
you,
here.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Tony.
Slim pickings today.
Y'all are rowdy.
Ready to convene, reconvene?
So when you come back into session, you need to note for the record that Mr. Campbell has joined
Okay, thank
officially.
you, Martha Brooke. All right, we're reconvening the planning commission meeting, and I want to note for the record that Tony Campbell has joined the meeting. So he is now marked as present. All right, so now we were at the final plat for Kingston Springs United Methodist Church, which was deferred from the March meeting. And Karen, did you want to summarize from Tony where we are on that?
I do. They have filed a plat, Mr. Campbell, to combine 2 lots together for the purpose of installing a pavilion for the outside use of the church. They are our first consideration after this for the downtown PUD overlay for mixed use because they are a church. And I explained to the planning commission that the little house that faces Oak Street is grandfathered. It was there long before planning and zoning. So it's a non-issue as far as setback, and I recommended staff approval because it does meet our requirements.
Move to approve the plat. Second.
Okay, any more questions or discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have 1 recused, right? Brian McKay.
Might want to stick around.
So, yeah, Brian, I think
Just in
Brian's
case.
involved in some rounds. So the next item, under old business, item B, Ellerslie subdivision update and next steps.
Okay. Did we miss something? How did we get from
Old business B.
Oak Street? Okay, sorry. Ellerslie subdivision. There has been a formal notice of violation issued to the Ellerslie subdivision and the HOA and the entities involved. I did an inspection of the property today. There are still runoff issues. I was out to take some photographs for documentation, met one of the residents there who was mowing his grass, discussed it with him in brief, but the impetus of the discussion tonight is that we are taking steps. I will say that there has been some forward movement. The payment of fees for the engineering review for the plans that were submitted have now been paid, and the engineer retained by Mr. Merville and the development group has responded to staff comments and engineering comments for the project. I anticipate receiving the final engineering review sometime this week. So we are still moving forward, but the notice of violation was issued because the ongoing runoff is still creating issues for the residents. I have suggested both to the developer and the owners that they might want to convene an HOA meeting and have sort of a mediation session with them, because they do individually continue to file complaints with the town, the property owners.
Okay. And I have two questions for you.
Certainly.
Just in light of the comments
Yes.
earlier. So my first question for you is, within the scope of that engineering review that you're talking about, does any of that, do you think, address adjacent property separate from that subdivision? And I'm talking about those condos here. And it may not. I just want to know if it did.
I believe that it will. One of the concerns that the engineer and I both have, Mr. Small and I both have the same concern about the area of detention of the water. The proposal that was submitted to the city suggests that the water be detained on the higher side of the property, and it's extraordinarily difficult to reroute water uphill. I think I mentioned that in my comments to the engineer at the last session, so they were resubmitted with that comment. The retenage area that the engineer and I have discussed and we think works best is following the natural slope of the ground. So from the city's perspective, there are two issues. There's the unfinished infrastructure and the damage that's being done to that. But there's also the individual lot owners, and that's an HOA question. And then there's the issue of the water making its way down and coming out on the road. So we have to be really careful which one of those issues we address, but it should have some relief. However, if it doesn't move forward relatively quickly, the destruction of the infrastructure, the roundabout, the streets, the roads, and the other that's occurring now, and the issues for the ponding on West Kingston Springs Road will not be abated unless it's addressed pretty rapidly. We still have not yet received the bond proposal. And then the other update I need to give you is that the property was transferred. It was transferred to Energy Source Partners. The city attorney and Martha Brooke will be able to expound on this some. And John and I met and discussed this. The fact that the property's already been, for lack of a better term, transferred to another entity. So we need to sit down, the three of us as staff, and craft a PUD agreement that will encapsulate that transfer of property. The only alternative to that would be to negate the existing plat that's on file with the county, the PUD agreement's on file with the county, the homeowners association that's on file with the county, and also filed with the Secretary of State of Tennessee. So it's going to cause redrafting of all of those things, in addition to crafting the PUD. So there's going to be a lapse in time, and that lapse in time was the precursor of the decision to seek a notice of violation from a stormwater perspective only to address the issues on the property. So in short answer, yes, it should have some impact if we can get movement on that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sharon on this? Okay, so that's it on item B under old business.
And Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but there appears to be an inadvertent item left off the agenda related to the Oak Street Church that didn't make it from one agenda to the second. And that is, if you remember back to the overlay that we did, each one was going to come to the Planning Commission for approval of that mixed use and whether it was appropriate in the area. We've already zoned and done the overlay on it, but it required, because some submissions for that mixed use may or may not be appropriate in the setting in which it's located. As an example, you may want to put a studio up in the back of your yard for art, but it may not fit within the setbacks or other issues. So that was drafted so that you were the final decision as to whether or not that use would occur. Now, why it didn't make it from one to the other, I don't know, but it was on the agenda from last month.
So what you're saying is we approved the plat, but we didn't approve the use.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the use is a real simple thing, so I don't know where we go from here, Counselor, but it was deferred from last month. And they are the body that approves staff doesn't have that authority.
Yeah. I believe you could do, because you've already approved your agenda, so I believe that it was deferred from last month. I saw that in your minutes. I believe you could do a, wait a second while I think through the Robert's rules on this. In light of the fact that it is an error on the agenda.
So, just out of curiosity though, the plat approval is done, so that allows them to move forward as far as getting the plat filed.
That's correct.
Could the use not be approved next month?
I
and
believe it
wouldn't
can.
make
I
any
don't think we're gonna
difference
bump
in
on
the long
any
run?
issues on that. 'Cause
I'm just
that
wondering.
wasn't their application for that. That was.
Yes, their
They applied
application
for
was
that.
in the planning commission application that was filed, was for that specific use. The concern that I have is not the structure itself. I don't think they're gonna start it next month, but this would be a deferral again, which puts us up against that 65-day clock that the state has established for either approving
But
or
if
denying.
the parties are in agreement, then if they're willing
Right.
to. If they're willing to, do we have
Just defer it.
You want to defer that item? Now, I believe that,
They should still be able to proceed with
right, they can
getting the
file a
signatures,
plat.
getting the plat filed, and then next month approval
Approve
of the use.
Right.
Separately.
It's an error on the agenda. Okay, so.
we could just note in the minutes that we realized there was an error on the agenda, but that Kingston Springs United Methodist Church representative agreed to defer that particular matter to the next planning commission, so that it can appropriately be put on the agenda.
For me.
So you'll need a motion and a second to vote to defer.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion? So the plat is approved, we already
Yes.
did that. And so this is deferring this one piece, the use. Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and Brian, you're abstaining, correct? Recused. All right. Okay, so back to, we've moved now to new business, item A, 8A, is that correct, Sharon?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You have in front of you a site plan for the Punjabi restaurant on Petro Road. If I may approach, Mr. Chairman. The pretty one. This business was occupied in C2 zoning as a restaurant. And I was on Petro Road for an entirely different matter, having to the Petro truck stop, looked across the road and noticed a bit of construction. They constructed an entire addition to the restaurant without a permit. They closed the side porch of the building without a permit. There was a shed located in the backyard that was being occupied by the workers for sleeping purposes. A couple of other things that need to be cleaned up. So all of that has been dealt with, and so I spoke to them, explained to them what the process was to correct it. The process is in front of you. One, we had to walk through the fact that sprinkler ordinances are required in the town of Kingston Springs for all new construction. So in front of you, this area in the rear is the addition they want to do.
That's out the back.
Yes, sir. It's out the back. And then this area,
Is it that log cabin building?
no, sir, it's the one, yes, it is the log cabin.
Yes.
It looks like a log cabin. And then this
Been a
area,
restaurant for years. Off and on.
well, it was, yeah, they just built onto the back without permit. And then the area on the side here, this little white space here, they enclosed and is also being used for food storage and sleeping.
I'm assuming it's gonna be an Indian restaurant.
It is.
Eat one meal there.
Now, before we get too far off track, because Kelly's taking notes, before we get too far off track, this plan has been submitted, site plan to rectify what they want to do. The semi-trailer that was being used for food storage is gone. The building where people are sleeping is gone. The area where people are sleeping on the side of the building is gone. So all that's been done. There are also two relatively large coolers that were located on the lot that were interior space food storage containers, which were not in the closed space. So we worked through all of that. Took a little minute. We did, and they have added 3 additional parking spaces. I have reviewed the site plan that are in compliance. The next step for them will be construction plans. This has been a 2-month process but we're there. And then last week, I issued them a citation for the installation of 2 signs without a permit. So, round 2. But we're addressing those now. I received the sign permit application yesterday, which will bring them into compliance. If the sign does not meet your sign requirements, it will be removed. So that's where we are. The work is done by unlicensed, uninsured contractors. So the entire addition is going to have to be removed.
Why wasn't the city manager aware of this? It's been taking place over months.
I don't know. My first interaction with him, I can't answer the question, Mr. Campbell. I can't answer it. Part of the complexity with finding these things is whether or not you have something to do in that particular area. Between the tornado, the flood, and everything else that's been going on, it's been kind of compact. I'm not excusing anybody, but it just happens. On average, in a given month, we have 10 to 12 locations where people are working within a permit in the town. We had one recently on 484 Old Barn Trace. I filed a complaint against the contractor's license with the state. And the reason that he did that is not because he started work without a permit, but even though he's a licensed contractor, he refused to get one. And he expressed that in language that I don't want to repeat.
Oh, go ahead.
A number of times.
You're married to a Marine, go ahead.
A number of times. His response to the state was equally abrasive. I don't think he'll fare well in that circumstance. But for us, we catch them as we can. We're screamingly busy, believe it or
I
not.
understand that. I'm not
So,
blaming.
but where we are now, and I would advise you to caught them in January. It's taken this long just to get items cleaned off the parking lot to the point that the architect could get on the lot. Because evidently everything that's ever been in a restaurant in their experience that no one was using was piled in the back too.
Yeah.
So all that had to be cleaned up. So the site plan now meets compliance. They have hired a really good architectural team out of Nashville. And his name is hysterical. It's Robin Hood.
I saw that on the
Isn't
thing.
that funny?
That's
That's actually his name. But he's been very easy to work with. On his staff, he also has a master certified building inspector. The second meeting went much more smoothly than the first. Way less swearing. So that worked out really, really well. So that's the site plan, if you're so inclined to entertain it.
So are we approving? Is that what we're doing on this?
Yes, you have to approve the site plan or they can't provide construction plans to move forward. None of the food is being stored where it shouldn't be now. We've taken care of that, and I drive by every time I come to town just to make sure.
So it's in operation, the restaurant's in operation?
It is in operation on the original part. The original portion of the
Okay.
restaurant at the front is still in operation and was recently inspected by the state.
And they're fully aware, because we all obviously had an issue earlier, a couple months back, where a fellow wanted to add a living quarter to one of the properties over there, the engineer, and we had to explain that wasn't, so they're fully aware of that now, and
They're
there's not going to be
fully
any...
aware and have received not only some education from the city, but also from the state of Tennessee's Department of Health.
Okay.
They operate a place over around Jackson. I
Yes,
know
they
that.
do.
Huh?
They do.
Yeah.
And they own,
I thought they closed that.
I thought they closed that
that
to
to
open
open this one, I think.
no.
Well,
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, still.
Watch me shake my head, no. This is White Holding LLC, throughout the country, all tied together. I'm a research freak. They own 213 locations. The code enforcement issues on those 213 locations number in the thousands.
Well, that's,
So, I would also do what you're gonna do with this, but I would also, in the future, while we're doing some training, we need to be talking about how antiquated our zoning ordinances are and what our requirements are for these types of things. And I think on a building permit, we really need a line on it that says disclose your other operating locations, because that allows me to bring that information to you. Okay, it requires them to give it, rather than me spending 18 hours trying to figure out who they are and where they're coming from.
I know this is the initial plan.
Sure.
When, are they adding more restaurant space
Yes.
or kitchen space? I'm looking at grease traps and things like that. When I ran restaurants, we had,
This-
every time we added square footage, we had to have grease trap, a bigger grease trap or more, for the extra tenants.
They have a grease trap sufficient for their process and their square footage with this building. Okay, they're on city sewers, so they're in a good location
Okay.
for that. That was one of the questions I asked, I always ask. But back here, this is a prep area, it's a dry prep area. That's where they're gonna start, there's not gonna be any cooking, all the cooking is gonna take place in here. So I asked that question, the reason I asked that question is because it relates to sprinklers,
Mhm.
and we have to have.
Yes.
So Sharon, I understand from you, this site plan is in compliance.
It is.
Okay. So, do we have a motion?
so move
So move to what?
to approve.
Barry? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and you can vote on this, right? Okay.
One additional comment on this particular location that I want to make is that the covered area on the side that's now open again appears to be lying on top of the sewer line. How that happened, what it happened, but I mean, they poured concrete on top of the sewer line. It's one of those things that I would strongly advise the city as you move forward in life to hire a full-time building inspector. You're at that point where one person, we have the 2 county guys doing it, but it's just not enough. There's so much going on. Houses are changing hands right now. In my stack last month, I did 37 permits for additions and reconstruction of existing housing.
Kingston.
In Kingston Springs, they're turning over at an alarming rate. And they're small, they're on small lots, and people want them to be bigger. We're extraordinarily busy. It won't last long. You can't, because we're limited by the number of structures, the amount of land we have. But it's been tap dancing to keep up with lately.
Is that sewer line something that's grandfathered in?
What?
Do they pour concrete over it? We can't make them rectify
We
that?
can't make them take it out.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, my advice is as you move forward with sewer plans in the future, you might want to rectify that, if there's a work in that area. So,
Okay, so Kelly, you got that, item 8A is approved. Okay. All right, so 8B.
yes, sir. This is, interestingly enough, right next door to the restaurant.
Yeah.
Folks here have acquired an additional lot next to the AK Lube, and they're going to expand. So what they are doing with this plat is to combine these 2 lots. They want to build another building. Their business is growing, it's thriving. I did go by there today. They have a real need for storage. I'm trying to say that in a very polite way, otherwise they're going to get a love letter.
There's a lot of mechanics on the ground out there.
Yeah.
They're going to get a love letter from the city if it doesn't get cured soon, because my ears are bleeding from the number of calls I'm getting about it. But they do want to combine this, which will allow them to build a building next door to
I was gonna
house.
say, make sure they have adequate parking. And then cars park everywhere.
You know, I'm a stickler about those. Those 10 by 20s are I want to hug them every time I think about that parking lot size. Every time I go into a parking lot where you can't get in and out,
I went over to get my oil change, I waited in line for an hour and then finally left.
I went once.
well, it's a good thing it's a thriving business, but they need to have space to do it. So it does meet the town's requirements. I have checked the plat, everything is in order. Staff recommendation is to approve.
I move we approve.
A second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so item 8B is approved.
I'm abstaining from that one too.
Oh, you're abstaining? Okay, so if it's still approved, you have one recused, I would think.
Here's a
Okay.
pretty picture of the thing you just saw, larger, because this is the site plan for the same business. They get kind of aggravating when we get this site. This is the site plan for 810 Road. Has been vetted, has been approved by staff, meets all your requirements. This is the site plan for where we're going to locate. In addition, in the parking that you asked about, Mr. Chairman, make sure we got plenty. So this is the proposed new addition, structure that they want to do, to expand the building. And I have reviewed this in great detail, for the same reason that I reviewed the one next door. So
Okay.
it does meet all of your requirements.
Okay, do we have a motion on 8C?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, do we have any more questions or comments on this? And Brian, you're recused on this one too? Okay.
Yes,
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes. All right, and then we have other discussion.
Yes, sir.
Item 9A, proposed city sewer expansion, Live Hills Road.
I think I briefly mentioned to the planning commission that we had a private property owner who wanted to expand sewer on Live Hills Road adjacent to, is it Carmack? What's that business? The industrial
Well,
one?
now it's
It's
Georgia
United
Pacific now or something,
Packaging
they
or
just changed
something.
it, yeah.
Now, but
The box
it's,
plant?
Yeah, box plant.
yeah, the box plant, there you go.
They,
That's
they
easy.
sell them every 2 or 3 weeks.
But on the property that was across the road from them on their road, but along Live Hills Drive at 191, the owner bought it, demolished that old house that was there, has done a lot of cleaning, and has tried to install a septic tank. The cost to install a septic tank on that lot with the bedrock is going to be somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000. So, he came to the city with a proposal. And I don't know if you remember this far back, this is reaching way back, but in 2017, we had our community outreach meetings, and I said you really should start focusing some economic development on the other side of the interstate, because Live Hills has about all it can stand. He would like to expand sewer at his cost. And, you know, when I first brought it to John, John's like, I don't know. I said, anytime you get somebody else to pay for it, you know, that's a really good idea.
Well, it makes you suspicious.
Well, it's Mark Spivey, and under normal circumstances, I would probably be with Mr. Campbell. I would be looking at them sideways like, what you fixing to do to my sewer? But Mr. Spivey is, to put it politely, not without resources. His goal, he's a member of the Golf Club of Tennessee, not that it matters in my review, I don't care. As you know, I'm ambivalent to who, it's the what that I look at. But he foresees that particular area not as a commercial area. He was offered the opportunity because it's an expansive piece of property. At one point, Mr. Hoover for the golf club discussed with us locating cabins there. And I looked at him kind of side-eyed like, yeah, get that to perk. But anyway, he wants to have a residential structure there. But my thought process is that if that sewer went that far, it would be a really, really inexpensive thing for the city to put it under the road, across, underneath Live Hills, and build some potential for commercial development in the future at minimal cost, which hardly ever happens. So, it's just an update. We're not taking any action. It was presented to the city commission. As always, if they present a plan, John and the rest of the staff and the engineer and I.
Is that the lot that's behind the box plant there?
If I'm driving down Live Hills Road, there's the box plant, it's the next parcel down Live Hills
There's a
Road.
bend in the road.
Down, up.
Will you bend and go up?
Either way.
At one time, wasn't there a metal works company that's gonna build something there?
Yeah.
Yeah, blacksmith shop.
Yep, fair.
Did that fell through?
They just went away.
Okay, I just wanna
No,
make
they
sure.
just went away.
And now Mr. Spivey owns the property.
Okay.
Who knew, right?
Moving
Things
right
change. We don't ask questions, we just take them as we get them. But that is his intent, and the plant, as you know, any expansion of utilities has to come to you. So when the plans are submitted, I just want to give you a heads up, because it's a prime opportunity for this body to recommend to the city commission that you might want to investigate the cost of running it under the road and getting it to the other side. Because septic tanks in that area are failing.
I know, that's down, what is that road?
It's Lyman Hills.
Well, but Liven Hills is going up. You're talking about crossing under Liven Hill.
Going under to the other side of Lyman
The
Hill.
other side, which will go down towards where we just talked about.
AK and all that.
Yep. Well, I would like to announce, much to my happiness, that the building that was occupied by the engineer that wanted to do the apartment
Yeah,
is now on city sewer.
it's now what?
It's on city sewer. You're welcome. They had to pay for it. So it allows for expansion of sewer because septic systems, we're down to property where you can't perk them.
Well, that's a swamp over there, ain't it?
Absolutely. And my second piece of advice to the city, long range, is that if you're going to do sewer expansion, you might want to reconsider your willingness to pump them and own them. Remember back to the McPherson property, we don't own any of that when it goes in. It's not our problem. He has to maintain the tanks, he has to maintain the lines connecting up to our lift station, he has to maintain the water, he has to maintain the roads. Don't inherit liability you can't afford. So the cost to pump everybody's septic tanks is not an unknown quantity, it is money. So as you go through in the future, you may want to reconsider whether or not you want to continue to pump this. Okay? It's just a high cost. It's going to every taxpayer, even the ones that aren't on sewer. And sooner or later, there will be a challenge. Because it's paid for by taxpayer funds.
Well, it's paid by, out of the sewer fund, though.
Right, but that money comes from the taxpayers.
Well, it
so-
comes from people, but only people on sewer.
Oh, so that's a separate
It's
fund?
a separate fund.
Okay, so they're not being, it's not
If
being.
you're not on the
general fund.
sewer, you're not paying sewer.
Score.
It's an enterprise.
Then y'all need to talk to Pleasant View, because that's not how they do it.
I
Everybody.
quit talking to Pleasant View years ago.
You should stop talking to most of them, but that's just me.
You don't pay it, Mike.
All right,
We'll look at it.
Well, I gotta think that
we're
one.
done
you
with that.
know
I
the
just
data.
wanted to bring it to your attention, but if he's willing to pay for that sewer expansion,
Yeah.
and,
It's worth pursuing anyway, you know, sure.
I mean, he's gonna have to submit plans, he's gonna have to go through TDAC, he's gonna have to do the whole 9 yards. So it'll get vetted by multiple eyeballs before
Right.
it comes to you. But the planning commission, it's a city commission decision, so your recommendation to them, this is discussion only, but when it comes back to you formal, you will be a recommending body to the city commission as to whether or not to pursue it. All right, so we're done with that one. Capital improvements, retreat discussion. So I think that probably, I did not attend the retreat this year, but I did talk to Mayor Gross afterwards and to John. And a decision has been reached that we have finally reached the point that we need to do some proactive planning rather than reactive. We're at that point. You're going to sell your future away in ways that you can't get back. So I will let the mayor share with you his thoughts on that.
Honestly, I don't have a whole lot right now. We just discussed the idea that we needed to start moving on this, and Sharon, I've discussed it several times in the past, and I think you had, I haven't received anything yet, but you had some examples that you were gonna distribute. It might be a good idea to distribute those to the
I will.
entire board, so that we can all kind of get an idea of what this process looks like in other locations. I think you mentioned some instances in Georgia.
There are, and I've
the-
also done them in Tennessee, and I've also done them in Kentucky, and I've also done them on behalf of the state. But point being, we've discussed this multiple times. You're now,
3 years.
well, the problem that you have right now, and as a city, is that you have very little usable land left. And you want to maximize the use of that land that's left to the extent that you can. But you're also struggling, we have to put this in the minutes since this discussion.
We do, don't we? Okay. I'm going to try to be as careful as I can. You have some sewer issues that need to be resolved. You have some water supply issues that need to be resolved. There are some other things that you need to look at with your build out in your infrastructure for Lyman Hills Road and the traffic issues that you have there and how that impacts other areas of the city. You also need kind of a cohesive capital improvements plan. Where's the money going to come from? How are you going to get it? When are you going to expend it? What's it going to go to? And much to my surprise, you guys don't have a community development block grant, nor have you ever had one.
We don't qualify for one
Why?
because of the median household income. That was one of the first things I checked on when I came here.
We make too much money?
Y'all make too much
The
money.
median household income of the city is too high to qualify for that
Well,
grant.
that's an unhappy circumstance, because I can't tell you how many improvements have been done over the years for that.
Has Pleasant View's used it though, right?
Yeah, they have.
Their median household
It's-
income's higher than ours.
And so has, well, I'm gonna,
It's
I know-
based on median household income, population, there's a number of
Okay.
factors,
Okay, so
but
maybe it's
GNRC
population.
said that we are not eligible here. Ashland City is eligible, and they
Pleasant
apply
View
for
is
it.
eligible too, because that's how they got their first big water tower, and then they turned it over to a quasi-governmental utility district, which always works out really well for everybody, right? But I'm sorry, I'm being candid rather, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but we need to start to plan capital improvements rather than responding to consent action or responding to a nasty grant that you get from some agency. We need to start planning how you're going to do this. And that in turn will open doors, because it's a charming little town, but everybody's looking at you. The number of calls I'm getting in a week are just blindingly amazing to me for these very few parcels that are left. The Law Garrison property, the piece behind the Sonic, the piece between the Sonic and the high school, everything that comes up, somebody's jumping on it. These agents are calling, mortgage companies are calling, investors are calling, because you're so Nashville adjacent. And the price of land in Nashville right now would shock you for commercial development. You would have a stroke thinking about it.
They're
So-
putting apartments in every damn patch of land they can find, I know that.
And some little patches.
Well,
Yeah.
see, I would like to redirect that a little bit, and maybe a little appropriate zoning to redirect that, because C2 is appropriate where you have it right now, but I don't know that you want to expand that going up the hill or to other lots, because that's going to bring truck traffic everywhere you go, and we can't solve that transportation problem overnight. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take rubbing people the wrong way, which is okay with me, because see, I get to get in my car and drive back to Kentucky, and you guys can feel like a big guy. So I just keep sandpapering.
Never bothered me.
I'm aware of that, but see, I wasn't the mayor, I'm just the planner. But that process is not as cumbersome as you may think. It's not as painful, and we can tie all of these different threads together for economic development, housing, commercial, infrastructure, all of that together. And I'll start hunting some money. I still think I want to mount an argument with the state. They don't get the last word.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is there a possibility to find out why we don't get approved and what we're missing by? Because as we're adding a 41-unit apartment complex in this town,
That might change.
median
income,
income's
too.
gonna go down, housing's gonna go up, we're gonna have more population. So what is that metric and what does it look like? And how close are we?
Well, Pleasant View Utility District encompasses quite a bit of the county, so there's a rural area as well as a city area. So it could be their demographic, because it's not city-owned. So the difference here is your sewer system only lies within the city limits.
Okay.
So that could be something to do with it, but it's definitely something that we can explore more. The last time I checked, though, we did not qualify.
And she does have a valid point, but then the alternative to that is you create a quasi-governmental utility district. And I can tell you from my experience, and I've seen hundreds of these over the years, they are not beholden to you. They write their own rules, and there are issues getting answers out of them.
Yeah.
So, and that's true of Pleasant View Utility District or any other one that I've dealt with. It's a common problem.
So I'll do a little research, Kelly and I will talk, and we'll try to see what we can do. But this money is forwarded by HUD. And there are multiple avenues for community development block grants. Rather than saying, I want some sewer money, we may approach it from a multi-platform. If we approached it from a platform of, I'm trying to be so careful because this is going to go on the record, and I don't want to offend anybody in any particular area, but you have a couple of areas in the city that could benefit from some housing stock turnover. Not to drive people out, that's not my goal. But you have, if we were to go street to street, house to house right now, you would probably have in excess of 100 people without a roof over their head anymore. Okay? So I'm trying to be delicate and explaining that to you. So if you approach it from that perspective, and then it's just a small leap to expand it otherwise to areas you see as potential development, we may have a little more shot from the housing angle than we do from the city infrastructure angle. So I'll explore that, provide some information, because I've gotten them done that way when I couldn't get them done for just sewer. Okay. Last announcement, and then I'm done with all of you. Code enforcement outreach to the community, April 23rd at Burns Park. I'm not asking you guys to come, you can if you want. Mike and I are going to be there. I expect it to be somewhat rowdy for the first little bit.
Next weekend,
Just so you know, always is. By the time is 11:30. That was the time that was decided on by all the staff. You know, it's kind of after morning and before soccer. Get in there. I have invited Judge Maxey, since he is our municipal judge, to join us. I held out the carrot stick of it's an election year, their voters here.
Does he even have enough?
He does.
So what we want to do is let people know first, because there's a lot of noise about code enforcement. There always is. There's never not going to be noise about code enforcement. But what we're going to do is give them some heads up about what is being looked at. Why do we show up in your yard? Where does that call come from? So that there's a little less acrimony about the process. But we are reaching a point that if I drive through certain areas of the city, I am going to be ethically obligated to start a condemnation process on structures. Just to let you know.
Is that commercial and residential?
Pardon?
Commercial and residential structures?
We don't condemn commercial.
Yeah, you can't
You cite them
condemn,
and
but you
find
cite
them
them.
until they give in. That's the process has always been. But for residential, if it's deemed uninhabitable, they can't occupy it.
Yeah.
So that, but we are approaching the point where there are children and other people and elderly people who are living in circumstances that we're going to have a problem if it comes to public attention. So just to let you guys know. But we're going to do that outreach and we're going to try to work with them. We have identified that THDA and their lovely housing program has $7,500 per unit to help. That's it. So we're going to have to go up the chain a little further to get some money to help. Okay? That's all I have for you, other than please tell your neighbors to come to code enforcement. I want them to understand the process and how it works. As you know, it's been topic of a lot of discussion.
Well, but it's so difficult here to get the word out.
We're putting it on Facebook, we published it in the newspaper, we've got flyers we're going to distribute
What
all over the
newspaper?
neighborhood. We've got the Cheatham County Exchange, so we
Any
got.
newspaper there is.
So the newspaper we got.
Cheatham County Exchange.
They used to have those at the post office, they don't have them there anymore.
I'm not sure, but I think they may have been bought out by a larger.
Um,
Yeah, because I used to go to,
That's how I was just gonna do, and then
That's
I just
right.
look at it online now.
So, you know, if
Well, I hadn't
anybody's
thought
got
about
a
that.
kid in journalism, you might want to encourage them to come to Kingston Springs and start up a newspaper.
Right.
But we're posting it on Facebook, which gets to everybody. Hit Kingston Springs, it's on the city's
I have
website.
more
We're doing all
Facebook
we
ever since I
can.
get.
And we're also going to hand out flyers. We're going to go door to door and hand out some brochures that have some useful information about code enforcement. So just so you know, and when your ears start bleeding from the phone calls, I apologize, but we've got to start somewhere.
You know, I've been pushing this for a long time.
Yes, sir. And, you know, Mr. Armstrong, my spouse and partner, is your codes official. And I will have to say that he is probably a little more polite and lax in his approach to it than I am. I'm just saying, by the time he gets there, I've already interacted with him 27
I
times.
like the way you put that.
But I'm just saying, by the time they get to Mike, I've already interacted with them a dozen times, and I already know what they're doing, but I don't tell them, you just go work it and make your own opinion. Some days are better than others. We had 3 court cases for code this week.
How many?
3.
3.
Took 2, got 1 continuance. Yay, whatever. So, but anyway, if you call, don't give anybody your name. If you call a complaint, I'm just going to tell you because it comes up.
What hell happens when all the ones I call
Listen,
my name
I'm
out?
not worried about you. You and I,
Tony,
we
this
have a
isn't the
force
time to talk
shield.
about that.
You and I have a force shield. It's called our personalities. People don't
Sharon, we also had item 9C that was added.
Yes, this is concept review. Open your little concept review pages. I'm gonna borrow this Pat minutes because this is riveting. The lot right next door to the fabulous Indian restaurant is vacant. How many of you know Tommy Crouch? Because I want you to raise your hand and disclose if you do. Yeah, okay. Well, it's not a vote, it's too good. I just want you to know who he is. Tommy and I met when he put up a sawmill on Highway 12, Mr. Campbell. Do you remember the sawmill on Highway 12?
Yes, I do.
So you know him. I just want you to know who he is. Mr. Crouch wants to buy the lot next door to the Indian restaurant. The business that he's engaged in now, not a sawmill, is he does hardwire setups for internet, cable, video, kind of that sort of stuff. And he wants to build an office warehouse, 4,800 square feet. You got a pretty picture of it in the packet. And so I asked all the usual questions. How many trucks are going to be going in and out here to deliver? Because we have a little bit of a traffic problem on Lebanon Hills Road. He said, oh, it's on Petra. And I said, but it connects. I'm not going to levitate. You guys find Lebanon Hills at some point. How often does that happen? How many deliveries do you have? Where you're hauling them? What are you delivering in? What's the size of the structure? How many employees do you have? He said, it's a small building, but I have 40 employees. What? There you go. I got your attention now.
They must be very friendly.
I'm just saying, you got 5,000 square feet, you got X numbers of offices. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Maybe they don't stay in the office all day, right?
Yeah.
But I'm asking questions. But it's 40 jobs, right? So I explained to him and provided him with the TPR from 2008, the TPR from 2021 from TDOT, all 3 of the traffic studies that we have along the corridor, because he's going to be required to do one. We have to be able to absorb the traffic. That avenue, and now we're going to have sidewalks, and we're encouraging bicycle and walking path traffic. My brain exploded when I saw that. But adding another layer of in and out, maybe more than that thing can bear.
Oh, yeah. Does he have, all 40 have company vehicles that they're taking trucks up to do this in? Are they coming in and out every day, or they were coming in?
Yeah, those are
house?
the questions that when they come here, you can't ask them some questions. That's a relevant question. Traffic is a public safety question, so you can ask those questions. I ask them. When he comes before you with a formal application, that's just something you tuck in your head. The biggest Lebanon Hills problem that we have is traffic and the inability to absorb it. We can't take it anywhere. We can't build another lane. We can't extend it all the way across West Kingston, East Kingston Springs Road, whichever one you want to choose. We can't take it anywhere. And we certainly can't wrap it around the corner and back it up to the school, because that's a public safety issue. So we're kind of out of options. So as we push on TDOT, and we will, to encourage them to support us in getting a lane behind the run of gas stations off of West Kingston Springs Road and through the relatively unbuildable patch before you get to the high school and get it across for local traffic. We can decompress some of that. But until you find that route, you're going to live with this problem. So, and hopefully they won't come back with another $40 million assessment, whatever. And then you need to widen Kingston Springs Road where you can. So those are all pushes, and those pushes come, as Mr. Campbell has so eloquently put it, by going to TDOT and just jumping up down to get it done. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other items? We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.